And a very good evening to you if you are in Guyana, in the Caribbean, in North America, it's evening. And if you are in Europe, good night to you. Good night to you. Good evening to you if you're across the border in Suriname, French Guyana, Brazil, Venezuela. Good evening to you. Good evening to all of you in Guyana. Special good evening to the people of Georgetown, the capital city. Friday night. It's Friday night. Please share the link. Please share the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on. Good evening to the people in the quarantine, New Amsterdam. Good evening to you. If you are in the hinterland in regions 1, region 1, region 8, region 9, region 7, wherever you are, and you're able to tune into Politics 101, we welcome you to tonight's edition of our program. A special good evening to the young people in the audience. The young people are the salt of the earth. More than half of our population can be categorized as young, 35 years and under. And it's a category of our population that has to be activated and socialized. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, the young people. It's your world, your Guyana. A good evening to all of you, all those of you who are watching. Some people are watching here from New York, of course, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, upstate New York, downstate New York, wherever you are in New Jersey, because you talk about New York, you talk about the metro area. Good evening to those of you who are watching, joining us from yes, Patterson, New Jersey. Patterson, New Jersey is in the house. Those of you who are joining us from the Washington D.C. area, Maryland, Virginia, Washington D.C. Welcome. Welcome to those of you who are joining us from Arizona, from Texas, and I know quite a few of us are coming from the South, in particular the Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to all of you. Toronto, Canada. We don't always zero in on those who are joining us from Toronto. And I know quite a few of us. Some of my friends out there in Canada, the Ontario province, the Toronto area, Greater Toronto. Welcome to Politics 101. Some of you are joining us from outside of Ontario. I call them the colder provinces. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Friday evening. I would like to urge you all to share the link. Please do share the link. And if you notice, there is on the screen the particulars for you to contribute to our emancipation drive. We are donating our donations to the Buxton Emancipation celebrations, the 1st of August. We come to you 2 or 3 times a year. I know we come to you at Christmas time and special events. So on behalf of Politics 101, we're asking you for some small donations. Those of you who can give big donations, very good. But we're asking for donations for the emancipation observances coming up in another week or so. And we are donating our donations to the Buxton observances there. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Brother Albert Morgan. Good evening to you. Good evening, Ozia. Welcome to Politics 101, Michelle Chester. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Clifton Stewart. Welcome to Politics 101. You see, last night we said that the PPP must go. The PPP must go because they are the obstacle to everything we desire for our Guyana. We want a Guyana of equality and equitability. We want a Guyana of democratic governance. And democracy for us must go beyond the democratic procedure and must include democratic substance. We want a Guyana that is shared by all its peoples. And we feel that the PPP is standing in the way of us realizing that kind of country for ourselves. And so the PPP has to go. And overnight, we didn't get to deal with this last night, but overnight, we would have heard the news that the new deputy speaker of the House is Dr. Asher from the Join the Party, the TNM, the new movement. The previous speaker, of course, was Mr. Schuman. And it was a break of tradition. I've said over and over here on this program, for democracy to work, the actors have to be committed. They have to be committed to democratic process and democratic outcomes. And it's always been customary that the Speaker of the House would go to the party with the most votes, the party with the majority, and that the major opposition party would get the deputy speakership. That has been the democratic practice, that has been the norm. And for democracy to work, it must not only be democracy in name, it must be democracy in action. It must not just be the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. So from the Burnham days come right through, the deputy speakership always went to the major opposition party. The PPP has broken with it. There were lots of criticisms. They went ahead and they denied the PNC, in this case, the APNU AFC coalition. They denied them the deputy speakership. And it became vacant again because Mr. Schuman vacated his seat for the representative of the new movement. And one would have thought that in the spirit of national healing, in an attempt to demonstrate to Guyana and the rest of the world that the PPP intends not to govern as a dictatorship. After all, they've been saying we were wrong in saying they're dictatorship. But here's an opportunity. The deputy speakership becomes vacant again. Why not let the PNC / the APNU AFC coalition take up the deputy speakership? Now, what would change if the coalition takes up the speakership? Nothing changes. Nothing changes structurally. Nothing changes materially. What changes is that it shows that the PPP is intent on going back to a kind of normal engagement. Nothing would change. No, the PPP would not have less power. They would continue to have power. But if they were to grant the deputy speakership to the major opposition, it would be a signal, a symbolic signal that they're ready to work together. But no, even when an act would not take away power from them, they're not prepared to cede 1 inch of ground. And that is a characteristic of a dictatorship. That is, the party in power holds on to every inch, every single inch of the political turf. And I've never seen a government in Guyana behave like this. The PPP likes to talk about the Burnham dictatorship. Well, even under Burnham, this dictatorship that they talk about, under Burnham, the PPP always got the deputy speakership. So if you say Burnham was a dictator, and he was prepared at least to grant the PPP some symbolic political space, and now you have this PPP government that is not prepared to grant even symbolic space, not real space, because the deputy speakership doesn't carry with it any power. Unless the speaker is not there and the deputy speaker goes into the chair. But by granting the deputy speakership, as I said, it would be a clear intent, a clear signal that the PPP is saying, look, we have heard the criticisms, we have heard the charges of dictatorship. Let us relent. They don't even have a sense of political aesthetics. So we have Speaker Nadir and Deputy Speaker Sister Asha, Dr. Asha. Both of them are Indo-Guyanese. Both of them are Indo-Guyanese. The PPP is perceived. The PPP is perceived as an Indo-Guyanese party looking after the Indo-Guyanese interests. And there you have the Speaker of the House, an Indo-Guyanese, the Deputy Speaker, an Indo-Guyanese, Dr. Asha Kissoon. Now, I don't buy the whole nonsense that Dr. Kissoon is something. Those small parties were sponsored by the PPP. And it was a clever thing they did. They were determined that any renegade, dissident PPP vote should not go to the coalition if people were intent not to vote for the PPP, the East Indians, that they will vote for these small parties, and they did. They were dissident Indian Guyanese, and they voted for the small parties, and some black people, particularly from the black middle class, who got fooled, they voted for, may have voted, a few of them, for these small parties. These small parties were fronts, was all part of the attempt, well, not the attempt, the reality of regime change. So they are PPP. Now the PNC put forward an Amerindian woman. They put forward their general secretary, Sister Dawn Hastings, and they voted her down. Now, if they were, if you know, if they'd allowed the coalition to get the deputy speakership, someone coming from another part of the world would look and say, well, look, there's an Indian speaker, and we have an Amerindian woman as deputy speaker. And at a time when Amerindians are in the news, but oh no, they couldn't even see the political aesthetics. There's not even an attempt at political window dressing, ethnic window dressing. So it is clear that this government, this party in government, is not prepared to cede 1 inch of political ground. They're closing all the doors. All the doors. They charged the opposition that the opposition did not accept the government. They did not accept the legitimacy of the government. Well, the question, have they accepted the legitimacy of the opposition? No, they have not. And as I said, they're not going to lose any power by granting the deputy speakership to the major opposition party. But they have not. So it is very clear that the PPP intends to hold on to every inch of political ground, every inch of political ground. And that's ominous. Because once you do that, once you close all the doors to inclusive governance, people will then have to act outside of the formal system. And once you begin to act outside of the formal system, you don't know where that will go. It will lead to instability. Because you see, this is where you start. You start by closing all doors to democratic involvement. And you force people outside of the formal system. And then once they get out of outside of the formal system, you have to bring down the power of the state on them. It leads to now naked repression. The other thing is the way in which they're treating the media. They tried to capture the Guyana Press Association. They didn't get through with that. So now they are painting the Guyana Press Association as an anti-government outfit. But more than that, they are retaliating against the media. Kaito News is carrying a hard fight against them on the oil contract. Stabrook News is hitting them very hard on some of their editorials. And they're retaliating against the media. They're now telling the media that you cannot send more than 1 reporter to a press conference held by the government. And your report is only confined to 1 question. If that is not dictatorship, then tell me what is. It's the muzzling of the media. The media is the medium through which news is filtered from the government, the opposition, to the people. And when you are trying to shut down the voice of the media, then you are closing down information from flowing in the society. They call the media the fourth estate for good reason. If the three branches of government, the executive branch, the judicial branch, the legislative branch, if those are the first, second, and third estate, the media are as powerful. And when you're trying to shut down the media, you're shutting down democracy. The government has appointed a commission of inquiry. They've named Major General Joe Singh as the commissioner. We haven't heard anything else. We haven't heard about the terms of reference. We don't know if Major Singh has started his work. We don't know anything. What we do know is that the government has moved to say $5 million it's given as compensation. Well, compensating them for what? You've set up a commission of inquiry to figure out what happened. Who was culpable? What was the extent of the damage to the community? We expect that in the commission of inquiry, these questions are going to be answered. And it is out of these answers that compensation would be determined. So in a sense, what the PPP is doing, it is acting against its own commission of inquiry. Are we to believe then that the PPP knows something that is going to come out in that commission of inquiry that it is trying to preempt? No. Again, what the PPP has done in giving compensation, it is not against the law. They're not breaking any law. It is within their power to do that. But it's bad governance. It's going against best practices of governance. What is it the PPP has to hide? If you are telling journalists that you are limiting them to one question, must be something you don't want the journalists to talk about, must be something you want to hide. And if you're saying to these families at Madia that we have set up an inquiry, a commission of inquiry, but we are giving you so much money because we can give it to you, is there something that we are preempting? It is for these reasons that we are arguing that the PPP has to go. It has absolutely no intention, none whatsoever. None whatsoever of even pretending to govern in a democratic way. It is not prepared to even honor the forms of democracy, much more the substance of democracy. We're going to try to get in some calls tonight. The number is on the screen, 633-1924. 633-1924. We're going to try to get some calls in to hear from you. We've been threatening to do that for a long time. To have you weigh in on these issues. The PPP has to go. It is naked dictatorship. And as I've been arguing on this program for a long time, we are up against not just a government, but we will get up against a process. Regime change of 2020 means that we have a government in power that is not subject to the checks and balances in a normal democratic society. Because those who installed it in power, their hands are now tied. In effect, what they have done is created a political monster. And you all know that I criticize the media. I criticize the Kaitro News and the Stabrook News for jumping on the bandwagon that the PNC attempted to rig the election in 2020 and ignored totally the evidence that was presented by the recount that showed that the PPP actually rigged the election, not attempted to. They actually rigged the election. The media have silenced that part of the narrative. And the only part of the narrative they talked about is the PPP's part of the narrative. What about the coalition part of the narrative? The Americans said it's a disputed election. Obviously, the Americans look at both narratives and concluded the election was disputed. That is what Lowenfield said. I could not certify this election. The media ran with one side of the narrative, ignored the other side of the narrative, helped to create a monster. And now the monster is turning back and beating the media. This is what happens in politics. People have a right. Our institutions have a right, when the rules are broken, to say the rules are broken. And if they see rigging, to say there was rigging. But you can't cherry pick rigging. You can't privilege attempted rigging and ignored actual rigging. And that's what the media have done. And they've helped to create a monster. And now they're trying to tell the monster, stop being a monster, and the monster is beating them. You know, we could throw back and say, we told you so. But you know, politics don't work like that. Because once they silence the media, then all of us are in trouble. But I'm making the point to say that regime change has consequences. The PPP promised them that they will renegotiate the contract. And some of them put their support behind the PPP. Put licks on Raphael Trotman and the coalition for signing a bad contract, and the PPP promised them that they will renew the contract, and some of them fell for it and threw their support behind the regime change. And then once the regime change happened and the PPP got into power, it refuses to renegotiate the contract. In fact, it is more bullish than the coalition on the contract. Raphael Trotman said in his book, I haven't read it yet, but I've been following. And he apparently said in the thing that, look, he feels that the contract should be renegotiated and offer to work with the PPP. And the PPP said, no, we don't want to work with you. Jack Dio said that yesterday. So a contract that the PPP said was bad, once it got power, it defends the contract 100 times more than the coalition. What more scampishness can you ask for? And that is why we have to create an alternative. We have to construct an alternative to the PPP, an alternative government and an alternative system of governance. We have to decide at Guyanese that we have to stop once and for all. We've got to stop this game playing. I was saying to some colleagues today that I shudder to think what could happen when the PPP loses office and the present opposition gains office. What the temptation would be to that new government. They're going to be tempted to exact revenge. Their supporters are going to tell them, we want revenge. That's part of the natural instinct. And that revenge could lead to a confrontation that could devastate our country. The government change tomorrow. The hierarchy of the army and the police that are now supporting the PPP, they're going to change their allegiance. The whole dynamics would change. It would flip from one side to the other. So the state that the PPP is building up now could come back to bite it. So one could only conclude the PPP is leading us down the road of devastation. So we have got to stop it now. The ultimate solution to our country's ills and problems, is for us to agree to share Guyana. That is the only just solution. Not to share it in a way where you tell me I must come into your house. Share it in a way where we recognize that Guyana is a house that belongs to all of us. And we need to share it. I don't subscribe to this crossover vote nonsense, because that's what it is. It's nonsense. If there are Indians who want to come and join the PNC and the other opposition parties of their free will, then we have to applaud that. And if there are Africans who go and join the PPP of their free will, we have to applaud that. That is a step forward. But if the PPP is using billions of dollars to coerce Africans in joining them, that's not crossover vote. And with all due respect, I know something about the PNC and how it has behaved when it's in office. I can say that in my estimation, I have not seen the PPP, the PNC bully Indians to come and join them. This thing about bullying people of another race to come and join is a PPP invention. Jack Dio said it a few years ago. When asked about power sharing, he said he don't believe in that. If people want to join want to think, they should come and join the PPP. So it means that the PPP is acting against a just solution in our country. And that is dangerous in the context of our contemporary politics. We now have wealth. Despite what some of our brothers and sisters are saying about, Exxon carrying away a lot of the money, that's right, and all of that. But even with Exxon getting the benefits of a lopsided contract, the fact is that Guyana has gotten so much more resources that it is today growing at 65% growth rate. That is stunning. Nowhere in the world any economy grows at 65%. And nobody's lying, Guyana is growing. It's a lot of resources. Don't you all believe, let anybody tell you all it's not plenty. It is. And it's going to get more. And what the government is using those resources to do is to maintain itself in power. That is the danger of the PPP. They're not doing a highway, a 4-lane highway, thinking that if we do a 4-lane highway, we are going to reduce traffic congestion, and a reduction of traffic congestion will lead to people getting to work earlier, and there will be more production. Or a 4-lane highway would help us to move goods faster from one place to the other. No, the 4-lane highway is to go to people and say, come and join us, because look, progress. The 4-way highway is for show off, not as development. Because if it was about development, in the first place, they want to put the 4-lane highway where they're putting it on the embankment. If you think about development, as the people of Pleasant saying, if you open up new areas at the back of the villages, you are then encouraging people to go and occupy lands at the back there. You open up new commercial areas. That is thought. But they're not interested in that. They just want to say, we're doing a 4-lane highway. The gas to shore pipeline. All the sensible economists are saying it is too expensive. It is not going to, in the long term, reduce the price of gas for the ordinary person. But yet they're doing it. Why? First of all, they're doing it because it's contract and money going into the pocket of their friends. Second, they're looking at the location as a way of bringing benefits to their constituency. And third is to show off. We in the WPF said to them, set up a national oil company Once you have a national oil company that is sitting there and looking after Guyana's interests and negotiating with Exxon, then the whole question of renegotiating the new contract goes through the window. But they don't want the national oil company because it will take Jagdeo and the government out of the position that they are in. They are acting like a national oil company. They're the ones. We do not have a company that looks after our national interests. They're looking after the PPP interests. We have said to them, start investing in research and development for new sources of energy, renewable energy. Start now so that Guyana can become a leader in renewable energy when oil goes out of business. Where is the vision? Where is the thinking? None. Because all they're interested in doing is fortifying the PPP in office and using our money for that. So, sisters and brothers, we have to remove the PPP from office. We have to remove them from office. And we have got to begin to impress on our leaders to begin to strategize. It's okay to say we will beat them at the next election. We're not going to beat them if the rules remain the same. Let's be clear about that. We're not going to beat them with this voters list. We're not going to beat them where they're buying ID cards and sharing it out to people to vote multiple times. That is recorded. No less of an institution than the police told us that there were over 4,000 people who voted at the last election that were not in the country. So we've got to begin to strategize. We agree that elections represent the procedure for getting a democratic government. Elections are not the sum total of democracy. So you hold an election, a crooked election, and you call it democracy. No, that's not a democracy. Elections represent the procedure by which we arrive at democratic outcomes. Elections by themselves are not democracy. But it is in the interest of the PPP to reduce democracy to elections. So that when you beat up on the media, you're saying that is democracy, as Brother Kit Nascimento is trying to tell us. When you mow down people's house, it's democracy. When you shoot down people's children, it's democracy. No, those things are the opposite of democracy. There's democratic procedure and democratic substance. The procedure is the means by which you come to power. The substance is the way in which you govern. And if you're sharing the nation's patrimony inequitably, that is not democracy. First of all, the PPP government has not come to government democratically. It was a disputed election, and the Secretary of State of the United States of America used the power of the American government and state to impose sanctions on one of the major competitors, hence influencing the outcome of the election. That's not democracy. So you didn't come to power in a democratic manner. And the logic, my studies, our studies in political science say it's hard to fathom a government. I have not known anywhere in the world where a government comes to power via extra democratic means and govern them democratically. The logic is that the PPP has to govern undemocratically because it has come to power via undemocratic means. And that logic means that they have to govern because you're governing against the will of at least half of the population. At least half of the population is saying to you, we do not recognize your right to govern. Hence, you do not enjoy widespread legitimacy. You are legal because you're sworn in and all of that, and GCOM declared the election win. That's legal, but it's not legitimate. Not the difference between the two words, the two terms. They mean two different things. And so if you do not enjoy the legitimacy that any government ought to have, then you are forced to find other means by which to maintain your power. And that's what we're seeing. And we are doing this kind of public education to get our supporters and to get the rest of Guyana to understand why we must change. And the dilemma that the media, the independent media, the dilemma that some of the civil society people are facing now is that they help to bring to power an illegitimate government that is now acting illegitimately. And they're trying to push back against the illegitimate action without recognizing that the roots of the illegitimacy were put down by them. And that if you're going to do anything, you have to uproot the government because it's the root. And are the independent media, our civil society, are they ready to uproot the PPP? That's what I'm working for. That's what we are working for, to uproot the PPP. You see what our brothers and sisters, when they're giving the PPP a slap here, a slap there, a slap there, they're slapping leaves. And a few leaves will fall. Dharamlal is like a leaf falling. But the root, the PPP remains rooted because that's what you all did in 2020. Nothing short of the uprooting of the PPP will suffice. And all of us have a role to play. Good evening, Sister Audrey. I was trying to remember you. Dark Materian. I know you live up the road, but consider yourself a Dark Materian and you are a founder member of Politics 101. Diehard PNC activist. I had the pleasure of working with her and others a couple of years ago, trying to put some projects together. Unfortunately, our own government didn't run with those projects. One minister made it happen. Another minister didn't make it happen. And Audrey, I know you remember those days. We have to uproot the PPP because they are a clear and present danger to this country. We have to begin to work as individual parties But we also have to work together as opposition parties. Everywhere in the world, when you're up against this kind of dictatorship, it calls for the unification of all our forces. When half of the population deemed the PNC was a clear and present danger, they formed something called the Patriotic Coalition for Democracy that brought together all of the opposition parties. When Brother Robert Corbyn recognized that the PPP was out of control in the early 2000s, he formed the A Partnership for National Unity, APNU. We are only going to beat back dictatorship by a broad coalition of forces that present an alternative path for our country. At some point, the PPP has to sit down at the table with us and to work out how we are going to share Guyana. But they are opposed to sharing Guyana. It means that we have to uproot them, create the conditions for sharing Guyana, and then deal with them afterwards. You can only think that you alone can run a country like Guyana if you are steeped in Ravidev's notion of the superior culture. Only your sense of superiority tells you that you can look at a country like Guyana and want to run it alone, all by yourself. Because you will have to either beat people with your superiority notions, or you'll have to coerce them by your superiority notions. You tried to coerce them, they didn't go. You tried to beat them, they didn't go. You tried to buy them, they didn't go. It means that your notions of superiority are false. I was telling some colleagues today that we have cornered Ravidev. However, Ravidev's superiority thesis has infected the PPP already. Sisters and brothers, we've got a lot of work to do. We have to present an alternative path and an alternative vision. We've got to stop fighting among ourselves. And we have to begin to fight for ourselves. While I have your attention here, please support our emancipation donation drive. This year, our Politics 101 donations, we are giving it to the Buxton 1st of August movement, planning their emancipation celebrations. Please make a small donation, a medium donation, a large donation. Please make a donation to that cause. The Cash App sign is on and the PayPal sign is up there. Please do. It's one of the things that we have to learn to do. It's one of the things where the other side is beating us. We have not yet get our heads into the notion that, we have to build our own cause. We have to support our own causes. And we must not force our leaders to always be begging us. Some of us are not in a position to give. Some of us are in a position to give. A $5 here, a $2 there. When you add them together, they come up to much more than we have ever had. We have to get into the habit of supporting our causes. Some of us have no big donors who want to come to us and give us money because they don't see us as potential winners. You heard Brother Norton and the PNC said at the local government elections that one of their problems was that the PPP was going to the big businessmen and tell them not to give them money. That is going to become more and more a reality. And many of you are in a position to contribute. Contribute, of course, within your means. Now you at where you can go. Contribute within your means. $5 is a beer. So instead of going out tonight and drink 6 beer, drink 5 and donate the cost of 1 to our cause here tonight. We have to begin to think strategically. That is why our villages came into being. Everybody contributed what they had, some more than others. And we were able to do the biggest real estate transaction in the history of Guyana. We have got to begin to support our causes. I am well aware that many people get cock and con with tricksters coming around and people giving them the money, and then they hear the money can be found or somebody swindle the money. We have had those experiences. I'm well aware of that. And so we are reticent. I am well aware of that. But that should not prevent us from contributing to our causes. And I ask you all to please contribute to our Emancipation Fund. We're going to use the proceeds from that fund to help the Buxtonians on the night of the 31st. The Buxtonians are going to have their big Black is Beautiful concert, and the main speaker, the featured speaker last year, we had 2 featured speakers. We had Sister Simona Brooms and Brother Nigel Hughes. This year is going to be the opposition leader, Mr. Aubrey Norton. The Buxton 1st of August movement and so on have invited Brother Aubrey Norton to speak to African Guyanese from Buxton on that night. Our Black is Beautiful concert, soiree, whatever you want to call it. And we're later on the next week, I think we have in our symposium, and we'll have people like Nigel Hughes and Brother Paul Slow and others speaking to villagers. So please contribute to our cause. So, sisters and brothers, as I've been saying tonight, we have to make up our mind now. We can't wait until they ring the bell and say election. We've got to begin to prepare ourselves now. And part of that preparation is the demand that the rules of engagement be democratic rules. The PPP is doing everything to remain in power. And we have to do everything to get them out of power. Everything within the confines of the law. They're trying to bait us in all kinds of nonsense. They're using the cybercrime law as a way of silencing us. We know who the cyber criminals are. From Imran to all the other rest of them, we know who the cyber criminals are. Let them go after the real cyber criminals. Let them leave people like Brother Morgan alone. I invite you all on this program to vent your frustrations. And I have every confidence that you all will vent your frustrations within the confines of the law. I don't have time to vet everything people write here. The ERC summoned me to go and say why I didn't condemn what this body said, what I didn't condemn what this body said. I am here to condemn the PPP, not to condemn my followers here on this program. Our followers on this program are victims of the PPP cybercrime. Look, they have these people here coming on every night trying to disrupt our conversation. Pull them in for fitness. Don't pull in Morgan. This work is serious work. We are not in the face of normal politics. A petro state with tens of billions of dollars is a transformed state. You all get that in our heads. There are things this state can do that it couldn't do before. This state can use the billions of dollars to buy the hierarchy of the police force and buy the hierarchy of the army. Thing na regular. When a state is flush with the kind of money, as Professor Thomas would say, when you go from the second poorest country in the hemisphere to perhaps the second richest country in the hemisphere, you know what a leap that is. There's no joke about that. And the way in which the capacity of the state in its fight against the people is enhanced by that money. The state is always fighting against its people. The state is always fighting to keep its people in order. The state is always fighting to control people. Now the state has billions of dollars to do that. This is not 3 cents politics we're into. And we have a ruthless government that is prepared to use that wealth to hammer its people. So we have to remove that government. And we have to put laws and rules in place that no government can use the wealth of the country to batter us. No government, including our government, when it gets back into power. We've got work to do. Join something. Join something. Join some organization. Join some political party. If you don't want to join a political party, join a pressure group. Join an African organization. Join an Indian organization, an Indian opposition organization. Join an Amerindian opposition organization. Look at what they've done to that child. Have that child come in the public and turn against ourselves, because that's what they forced that child to do, to turn against ourselves. A government that is prepared to destroy the humanity of a 16-year-old child like that. to give that child that heavy burden to bear. You look at that child and you know she believes nothing that she's saying. Oh, what a wicked set of people who form this government. How can they watch their own 16-year-old children, grandchildren? Look at what they've done to that little girl. It is more than making her into a papi show. It is more than that. It is taking away the humanity of that child and turn her into a robot where somebody presses a remote control and get her to chat. We must never forgive this government for that. The PPP must go. It has to go, and we've got to begin to plan, act strategically, and leaders cannot do it by themselves. We need the support of followers, and followers must demand enlightened leadership. I'll be a fool if I were to sit there and said we've given you all enlightened leadership. We have given you all, in some instances, good leadership. In some instances, but not always enlightened leadership. We have to make that pivot, that upgrade from good leadership to enlightened leadership. We are up against a monster. And wash on, make Anne come clean. The burden must be shared between leadership and followership. Some of us don't depend on the government for nothing. So we can do some things that those of you who work with this spiteful government that is going to harass you and knock you off and do you all kind of thing. But you have to find ways and means to contribute to the struggle. Even though you are vulnerable because of you work for a government, a spiteful government. Let not our hands be tied. Let not our mouths be muzzled. We are in this thing together. We have to fight as individuals, as families, and as communities. We have to fight as individual parties, but we have to fight as partnerships and coalitions. We cannot do this alone. We're fighting against a system, and a system that is now oiled, greased with plenty money. And we see what they're doing with it. Make my last plea to you, please make your donation. I think the Cash App stories on the screen, the PayPal. Make your donation, our emancipation drive, donation drive, and we're sharing our proceeds with the Buxton 1st of August movement. We're coming up on emancipation, and it's an important season for African Guyanese and for all Guyanese by extension. It's the African Guyanese New Year. And we have got to renew our vows to our racial group, our vows to our country, our vows to our region, the Caribbean. We in the Working People's Alliance, the WPA, said take the money out of the American Bank, that Natural Resource Fund, put it in the Caribbean Development Bank. Now, if you only say anything pro-Guyana, they say you're old-time socialist and you anti-Exxon and you anti-American and all those kind of nonsense. You now cannot take a nationalist position on anything. The communist PPP, the nationalist PPP is now shamelessly, even Exxon is ashamed to do some things for itself that the PPP is doing for Exxon. We're going to be back tomorrow night. As you know, we're on now on weekends where we can make it. Take a breather. Go to the market in the morning. It's not always an encouraging trek to the market because we know what the prices are. But the way to deal with the prices is for you to have more money in your pocket. There's not much you and I can do about the rise in prices. That's determined by the market. But what the government can do, the government can give you more money to offset the dynamics of the market. The market determines prices. But the government, who are the custodians of our money, can give you money so that your income can keep up with the rise in prices. That is why we are glad that Norton and the PNC have finally embraced the cash transfer, what you all call the 5,000 US proposal by Tyke Thomas and the WPA. It is meant as supplemental income, so that when the prices go up, you have something to supplement that. Again, it's the market that determines prices, but it is for the government that has the resources to make sure that income keeps up with prices. It's not no big technical economics. It may be, but part of our job is to get through the technicality. We are making progress, however. We have made some progress since 2020, and we'll continue to make progress. We are building a consciousness among our people and turning that consciousness into movement. A movement for liberation, economic, political, and cultural liberation. A movement that will pressure the government. We have political parties and we have to have pressure groups. There are things political parties are going to be challenged to do. And pressure groups must pick up the slack. We're going to talk more about that. Please make your contribution. And I'll see you all tomorrow night.